So this is a first. I've started the show with the glasses on. Usually I have to go to the glasses a little bit later. It's another episode of You May Also Like. This is a podcast about people, places, and things, and we're going to stick to the people side of things. I want to welcome Joe Williamson, who is a nerd dad and the host of the Nerd Dad podcast.
I am. Thank you. Thanks for having me, Matt.
It's by the way, we don't get a lot of time to just sort of talk about things and stuff, but that's really what your whole life is
It is.
you might be a person, but there's places and things that we're going to talk about here, and being a parent. How old are your kids?
7 and 3. I think I passed the first test. Yeah.
And for disclosure purposes, I've got 23, 23, and 21.
Good gravy.
Now, I believe I was supposed to parent myself out of a job.
I see that. Yep.
Is that the end goal?
I think so. Yeah. I have a third one coming too. A third one is due end of March. So
Wow.
I'm heading down to the 3, and I think that's the idea. Is you get them in a position where they can stand on their own.
I think you and I are going to be coming at it, I think, from maybe a different place, because parenting, I look at as something that is constantly evolving. I would sort of think that I'm like the generation ahead of you when it comes to parenting. I've done all the damage to my kids that I could possibly do, I think.
It's done. Whatever you were going to do to them is done. They're already in therapy talking about it, and they're saying, Dad could have been a little bit nicer. Did you do timeouts? Sorry, I'm now taking over. Did you do timeouts?
Yes.
I've been told timeouts are not allowed anymore.
See, it went from spanking to timeouts, and now timeouts are not allowed?
That's what I'm hearing. That's what my wife tells me. She's like, can't do timeouts. Because the idea of them being in the room by themselves, I'm assuming you're putting them in the room by themselves, can cause some abandonment things. You're going to mess your kids up eventually. Just depends on how you do it.
You see, I don't believe that. I think...
Okay.
I mean, yes, it is an abandonment thing. We want you to abandon the bad thing you were doing that caused the timeout.
They're left alone in a room. Dad said, I don't want to see you anymore. You did a bad thing. Go away from me.
No, I don't want to see you right now.
But you're approaching it as an adult.
Yes, correct. So what would replace a timeout?
Honestly, a lot of yelling. It's not better. I still do timeouts. What I do with them, though, is I do timeouts with them. So I take them out of the situation and I sit in the room with them. And I say, okay, I don't say it in this phrase, but you're being a bit of a jerk right now. Let's go sit in your room for a little bit. And we're having we're having some big feelings. Let's sit in our room, calm down. And then once the emotions have kind of dissipated a little bit, then we can kind of talk about the behavior that was there. It's very tedious, but fairly effective.
But in the heat of the moment, when there is a conflict or a disagreement, don't you need a little space before you can come back and have that sort of common sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And it's, I mean, I'm very fortunate that I have an engaged partner who's active in helping me parent. She is definitely the cooler of the two heads. So sometimes she'll tag in and be like, I got this one for now. You can come do it in a minute. And it's not uncommon for me to have to say, Dad is having some big feelings. I'm going to walk away for a minute. And I will just literally remove myself from the situation before I come back. And then I'll say, okay, now we got to go to your room and talk about this. Because in the heat of the moment, we've all been there. You can lose your cool. Doesn't feel good afterwards. And that parental regret kind of seep in afterwards. But in that moment, you're in it, and you're lashing out because you want them to get it. And I think you forget. I'm dealing with a 3-year-old. He's 3. I have been to therapy for how many years, and I am on my anxiety med to help me survive. He's 3.
Is it safe to say that nobody really escapes parenting?
No. no one escapes parenting. We all do a certain element of damage, might not be the right word, but we all leave these little scars on our kids. Sometimes it's it can in retrospect it can feel endearing, and you might think back and you hear stories, oh, my dad used to hit me but I deserved it, that kind of thing. You sometimes hear that. So I think it's just, you pick your battles and do your best you can, but you're going to leave some damage there.
How do you stay on the same page with your wife or partner? I'm sorry, I should phrase that properly. I got it right?
Yeah, wife is fine. I said partner because I'm also kind of cognizant of it, and it's so much more of a partnership, especially when it comes to parenting. If you're doing it I'm going to say that as a broad statement, but if you're doing it in that kind of environment and you're getting that kind of buy-in from your partner, it does become a partnership. It's not a one and done situation. How do you keep on the same page? It's talking. You got to talk and own it when you screwed up. Like if I've lost my cool and she'll look at me, she'll be like, you lost it there. Like, yeah, I did. Yeah, I lost it there. Or vice versa. Like if in her kid's situation, sometimes, she can be a little bit on the germaphobe side of things. I'll say, I think we need to dial it back a bit, because I don't want the kids to be afraid of spiders or whatever the case is. I want them to be comfortable, but you got to have that conversation and that talk it out, because otherwise it goes nowhere. And then the kids get mixed signals, and it becomes a losing battle even more so.
Where do you find the time, by the way, to speak with your partner for this stuff? Because I look at your life right now. You mentioned before we came on here that you're taking care of parents.
Yep.
There's 2 kids. There's a third one on the way. Jobs, career, busy.
Yep. Podcast.
Tell me about making the time to have those difficult conversations with your wife. And I don't mean that they're difficult as in it's going to be like some sort of marital breakdown in the process. I'm just saying.
I mean, it might be.
But it's difficult to come together on these subjects.
I am extremely fortunate, and I always kind of preface this by saying it because, like, there's a single parent who might be listening to this and going, well, of course he can do that, right? So I'm extremely fortunate that my wife and I both have jobs that are essentially 9 to 5. We are big on routine. So our routine is, for the youngest one, the 3-year-old, by about 6:45, 7 o'clock, he's brushing his teeth. He's asleep most days by 7:30. For the 7-year-old, he's asleep most days by 8:15, 8:30. That half-hour window, 8:30 to 9 o'clock, before we start to watch TV or whatever, it has just kind of naturally evolved into conversation time. And it is, we're doing something. We're putting away the toys. Someone's doing the dishes. Someone's, putting away the groceries that have been left out all day. Someone's folding laundry, whatever the case is. And those 30 minutes have become that kind of parental talk, relationship talk about whatever the hell happened in our respective lives. And then we turn on How to Get Away with Murder or whatever show we're binge watching. And then we tune out for a couple of hours, then we go to bed. But it seems to be like a 30-minute window. And we didn't schedule it. It's not something we talked about doing. Hey, I think we need to have more parental time to talk about things. It just kind of seemed to naturally evolve that while we were tidying up the house, that became our time to figure it out and get on the same page.
Do you have a date night?
No.
A lot of people find date night to be sort of cliche and silly or doesn't really fit. But like, what about what we call time together?
Yeah, for sure. But we do value that 9 to 11 is our time, and the fact that we get a few minutes to enjoy something together. It's never her show. It's never my show. It's not like I'm not a big sports guy, so I'm not like, I gotta watch the hockey game. It's whatever we watch. It's typically Jeopardy, The Daily Show, that kind of stuff. We just seem to have this rhythm, and it works. Now, where it can get chaotic is the situation we're in right now. We're apart a lot throughout the day. She's obviously 8 months pregnant. She's in her own. She can't put on her socks without assistance. So but you make that time, and it doesn't have to be elaborate. I don't think it has to be massive. It has to be a gesture. It has to be show an effort, show engagement, show interest in your partner, for it to be meaningful. It can be, I was out, I thought of you, I picked up your favorite cheeseburger. And sometimes that means the world to the person because you were thinking of them when they weren't expecting you to be thinking of them.
It's approaching lunch where I am. I now want a cheeseburger. I think one of the things that you do recognize about your wife is that she does not like the zombie type crazy television shows. I know that because you mentioned it earlier today on a broadcast you were doing. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm in that pile. I do not want to see zombies. I don't want to see nutty stuff. And just for you to recognize it means you don't have to watch it. You can watch that on your own time.
Exactly. And I have literally on my phone, I have a list of shows I watch without her. So it's, if she's going out, she's running errands, I have a few minutes for Joe time, whether or not I want to spend that working on my podcast and my branding, or whether I want to watch Schitt's Creek because I know she wouldn't like that kind of humor either. That's for me, and that's how I kind of carve out those little spots for me. But I will say, the podcast, the branding, the being involved in crier media, getting to know yourself, Matt, has been, like, through COVID, has been a massive boom to my self-esteem, my ego, my like all of these little things in my life have come from having a hobby that I'm super passionate about that I can share with her. Now, she doesn't love all the time and attention I give to it, but when I get a win, today I conversed with Spenny on Twitter, and Spenny agreed to come on my show. That felt good. That felt great. I'm going to share that with her, and she'll dig that. She'll buy into it. But that idea of also not losing yourself in a relationship, it's very hard. It's very easy to lose yourself in your relationship or your kids, but try not to lose yourself.
Well, I only think it makes sense that you would succeed at this because on the nerd side of things, I mean, that's really what podcasting is. And the nerds have started to take over really the millennium, starting in 2000 with Napster and the creation of that. I mean, nerd thought is really just taking over.
It's not even nerdy anymore. It really isn't. It's just kind of like, it's because nerd culture, but it's like hip hop music being counterculture. It's mainstream now. It's mainstream. You can make a buck off of it.
If you're a nerd dad, what are the cool dads up to?
They are coaching baseball practice. They are actively engaged in hockey fights. They probably are in a sports league of some kind. I like playing softball. Play once a week. Tried to play hockey as an adult. Got convinced to try to learn hockey. One concussion and a few years of trying my hardest to be bad at hockey. It was just like, I'm not doing this. This is stupid. I'd rather be at home watching TV or building Lego or something. Like, it's more who I am. It's more my wheelhouse. And that idea of just kind of embracing that persona, that nerd dad, became easier to justify. And I'm like, this is what makes me happy. This is what makes me happy. I like being a little bit of a loner sometimes. So that's where it goes.
Yeah, well, it's great being a parent, and it just absolutely flies by. And your oldest is 7. Mm-hmm. And I was thinking, and I thought I may have saved this for later, maybe when the boys were 10. And I have 3 boys. And
I'm going to head on my third. I'm getting my third as well.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
I know.
You know, which each passing opportunity comes the opportunity for a hockey goalie. So heads up.
God, they're nuts.
Yeah, I don't have any hockey goalies. I refuse to let them go in the net because that's an entirely different parenting experience when there's a goalie in the house.
I don't think I could watch. I don't think I could watch pucks being fired at my kid. I'm not sure I'd be comfortable doing that.
So it's 8 a.m. and I see this all the time when I'm, at the hockey rink. It happens. It's been happening for a long time. It doesn't matter. This will never go away. So let's say your son or daughter's in the net, puck goes in the net, it's 8 a.m. Every parent turns around to look at the parent of the goalie going, what's wrong with your kid? They're not saying it, but they're looking at it.
When my 7-year-old was playing soccer this year, he's not athletically gifted. He's got my genes. He's average at best. And he made some plays, and I could hear grumbles from other parents, and I'm like, I may look like I'm not going to come over there and fight you, but I'm going to come over there and fight you if you say a word about my kid. I'm just letting you know. I don't know. I couldn't take it.
I found this a little bit later on, like when the boys got to be about 10 years old. As a parent, I say, I think I have to step away and let them figure it out for themselves. Refresh my memory. Are there moments of that for, between the ages of like 4 and 8 or 4 and 9, where as a parent you go, I'm going to sit this one out?
Yeah, I think it's when I see conflict brewing at a playground, and that's when I kind of have to take a step back. Maybe there's a popular. I try to take my kids to the playground every weekend, and during the summer months in Canada, and I can remember distinctively seeing like a queue or something. People are kind of lining up to do an activity at a monkey bar, something like that. And I'm like, he's going to need to step in and be a little bit more confident to get in there. Am I going to let him miss his turn, or am I going to be that helicopter parent who kind of slides in and is like, hey, it's your turn now, buddy. But instead I walked over to him and I was like, when it's your turn, you go. And just kind of own it. And it was more just a piece of advice, but I let it happen. And when he goes and he realizes that there's no repercussions for just going, the kid behind him didn't want to fight. The kid in front of him wasn't offended that he left too early, whatever the case is. He was like, oh, okay, I can do this again. And it becomes easier for him down the road. Because I'm going to talk about the therapy that I've gone into. You talk about the fear of these consequences, but you don't know what the consequences are. You're afraid of them, but you don't really know how the situation's going to play out. And I don't want my kid to be afraid of those unknown moments. So try it. See what happens. The worst that can happen is someone says no. I'm here if you need me. That kind of thing. So yeah, there are definitely those moments where you're like, I got to see how this plays out. I'm gonna see if he falls off that, and I'm ready with water and a Band-Aid, but I'm gonna see if he falls off that. I'm gonna see if he steps up and tries to use his voice and see what happens.
Being a dad feels so complicated because the role has changed. It feels like it changes every 7 to 10 years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know. We're no longer Archie Bunker. We don't get to come home, put our slippers on, and argue with Meathead about the politics. That's a real topical reference. I'm sure the audience will love that. But
that's what we think about when we think of that, 1950s parent and the 1960s parent and Father Knows Best and My Three Sons, even though that was an unorthodox family situation, but the role of dad.
Yep.
And then it evolved into the Brady Bunch, and then it evolved into the Cosby Show. And then it evolved into, I'm trying to get to like the 90s.
I would say Homer.
Homer Simpson.
Yep. And then, now we're Peter Griffin, Bob's Burgers. It is King of the Hill. I was just talking about King of the Hill on my show. And I guess depending on where you are, situated and where you grew up, I'm in a very liberal city, very progressive. That role of fatherhood has changed so much from being, all you have to do is be present to get an award. To be Father of the Year, all you have to do is show up and not hit your kid. To you and your wife, or you and your partner, whoever, are going to split parenting duties as close to 50-50 as possible. And you're going to have to be, you're expected, as you should be, let me clarify this, you should be expected to help out around the house. Because the roles have changed for women as well. They used to be the homemaker. Then they were the homemaker and the person who took care of the kids. Now they're expected to be able to do all three as well. And it's a strain for both. Even now with the advent of my third one coming, I could take 5 weeks off for parental leave and get a little EI from the government. Okay. Well, I went to my employer and I was like, how much will you top me up for that? And they're like, we don't top up for parental leave, but they will top up for maternal leave. So if I was taking mat leave, if I was taking that time away from my wife, they would top me up, but just the additional weeks that the government gives out, they won't top up. So there are these kind of little nuances to the whole thing, but that strain is very real. And I will say, I'm going to give a shout out to my dad here on this one, because my dad was probably, he was not quite Homer Simpson, but he wasn't quite Archie Bunker. You know, he was somewhere in the middle there. He was trying. But him as a grandfather, oh boy, if he isn't progressive, if he isn't dropping I love yous and hugs and kisses and being kind of expressive with his emotions that you just didn't see from guys his age. So it's continuing to go that way. I think we're starting to kind of level out, because we're not 50-50 in the relationship between husband and wives, but I think we're getting closer to that point. But I know a lot of people are going to disagree with me on that one, but I think we're headed that direction where those growing pains are going to start to level off a bit.
Maybe it shouldn't be 50-50 in any relationship. I think the target is 50-50.
Fair, yeah.
But if I'm good at cooking and I love the kitchen and she doesn't, then ergo I will cook more. And if I'm a little bit truant in cleaning up, she'll pick that up. But maybe I'm good at laundry.
But that's 50-50. You're splitting the responsibilities. It's just... Well,
I mean, like how do you want to cut the banana, right? And,
I guess, fair enough.
So, and sometimes it's more equal than others, but I think it's sort of a recognition of what, you know, the equal is. I'm always a proponent of it. It doesn't matter if it's parenting or anything, that if you're good at something, do more of it. If you're bad at something, do less of it, but always stay curious to become better at it. Listen, that's the best meme that's never going to make it to the internet, but
it's a little wordy, but yeah, I got you.
What about the clumsy dad? I mean, I see it on TV all the time, and I think it's ridiculous. But it's, if every brand still wants to have a clumsy dad at the center of their ad campaign, I think it will be I think it's like the last bastion of being a dad. It's kind of like, you know, it's Homer Simpson again and Peter Griffin. That's used to sell products.
Yeah, and now, I mean, your kids are way older, but the idea of Bluey, his dad is Bandit. The Bandit in the show Bluey is a real modern take on a Homer Simpson, which is an extension of Fred Flintstone, which, you know, all the way down. And he's not clumsy, but even they portray him as being kind of oafish. He's forgetful. He doesn't always take the best care of kids. He's the fun one in the relationship. Mom is the serious one. Dad is a bit of a clown and a jokester. And that, there's danger to that. There's danger in that these are the role models. Because, you know, we talk about seeing ourselves and seeing society on TV and the characters that are portrayed. Well, if the most dads are portrayed as oafish, clumsy, forgetful, that becomes a lot of role models for a lot of people. And it becomes the expectation, potentially, for people who are looking for partners down the road. My husband is going to be oafish and forgetful and clumsy, and I need to be the lead parent. It's dangerous at times. If you stay thinking long term about it, there's ramifications there.
So the pandemic really accelerated a lot of things. It accelerated what we're doing now. A lot of people went home and did podcasts. A lot of people started home businesses.
Yep.
But what do you think the legacy for parenting will be through the pandemic? What changed? Because I was home alone. My guys were off at university. I can't really see what really changed, but for a parent, when you go to 2019 versus when we're coming out of the back end 2022, 2023, what do you think the legacy change is for parenting?
Social interactions are going to be different from now on. Sports seem to be kind of immune to a lot of these things. So I'm going to separate sports for the time being. But even things like birthday parties, I have noticed that birthday parties have gotten smaller. It's a lot tighter, the groups. They're not as elaborate as they were. There's a lot more delicate conversations about, can masking in these situations. And I think that those social interactions are going to have long-term effects on our children as well, because during these formative years, they are learning how to interact as adults. And for 2-3 years, we said, don't go near anybody. Don't go near them. If they sneeze, turn and cross the street. So I think that those ramifications are going to be felt when they become adults and start entering the workforce. Because it's going to start showing up as they become teenagers, how they interact, how they socialize, how they date. And then when they enter the workforce, what are their expectations of being able to work from home? What are their expectations of size of the team that they manage? Whatever the case is, it's going to be felt in those things, because social interaction went out the window for 3 years.
We talked earlier on about, the timeout and how that's not really seen to be in favor anymore. What is something that is being practiced right now by parents that you look at and go, I don't think that's going to work?
I don't know the exact name of it, but it's something like gentle parenting. I don't remember the exact phrase of it, but the idea that if your kid is throwing a temper tantrum, trying to get to their level and saying, okay, so we're having some big feelings right now. What caused you to do that? I'm like, they're a kid. They're irrational. They're going to do irrational things. And I know this piece of parenting advice isn't written down anywhere, but sometimes when I think of dealing with children, I think of the dog whisperer, Caesar, whatever his name is, Caesar. And he would go tsk, 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 to kind of break the dog's attention when they're super focused. I sometimes feel like you have to do that with kids. They get into a temper tantrum and you kind of have to tsk, tsk, snap them out of it, get them to focus on something else, and then come back to reality. But this idea of getting down to their level and trying to get them to explain their feelings every time, can you do that? Can you explain every time you're having an irrational feeling or thought? You can't. You're human. You're going to fly off the handle. You're going to want to cry sometimes because you had a bad day at work, or it was the last straw in your brain that day, and now you're ready to tear up. Well, maybe your kid didn't tie his shoe properly. That pissed him off. Now, the rock he wanted to kick was kicked by someone else, and now the ice cream cone is vanilla and it should have been chocolate. Now he's losing his mind. Well, he's not going to be able to connect the dots there.
So to answer your question, by the way, no, I'm not able to do that without paying somebody $125 an hour
to talk to you.
Yeah.
And then, and this is where the idea of like, oh, well, we should be able to talk to our kids about their feelings. Agreed. But I think trying to get them to understand their feelings is a really, really difficult task for a child. We pay a lot of money to do it. And the first time I was in therapy, Doc's like, what do you want to talk about? I'm like, I think I'm nervous around people. And it takes weeks before you get to any sort of conclusion, before you start to narrow it down as to what the cause of all this is. You're not going to be able to help a child in the moment. You just help them calm down, feel good about themselves, move forward.
Aren't you better off, by the way, like going and looking in the rearview mirror after like the tantrum has happened and maybe have the discussion at that point and not in the moment when they're having the tantrum?
Yeah, I got to agree with that. Because they're focused. They're one-track mind. They're in fight or flight mode. Whatever has caused it, they're in fight or flight mode. But in retrospect, they might be able to. And you can lead them a little bit, because you might know what the problem is. You might say, Is it because we didn't have vanilla ice cream today? And they go, yeah, it was. And you're like, okay, so sometimes vanilla ice cream won't be available. And, you lead them a little bit, but you're right. You gotta have them calm down first so they can hear the feedback. No different than when you are hearing it from your boss. If you're pissed off or whatever, you're not going to hear what your boss has to say at that moment. Gotta calm down.
I don't mean to put a lot of pressure on you, but
Sure.
you've got another one on the way.
Mm-hmm.
You're on the precipice of becoming outnumbered
Mm-hmm.
in the house. And I'm thinking that you've got a 7-year-old, but then you've got another one on the way. And we went through a pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
How aware are you about how different you're going to be parenting number 3 versus what you've done with number 1, given what you've learned and given the circumstances of the era that we're in?
Tough question. I would say I recognize I'm screwed. I think there's a lot of times where when it's chaos with the 4 of us, and I look at her and I'll go, soon there'll be another one. Right? Soon there'll be 3 of them. And you have those moments where you're like, was this the best idea? Are we sure we wanted to do this? And there's love there and it's all, in jest, but you recognize, you're like, we're screwed. We're real screwed here. And it's not uncommon for me to already go, when he is 4 and maybe entering T-ball or whatever it is, the other one will be 11. That kid is going to have to be in something very casual, sports related, because I'm not going to have time to be able to get all 3 of them to sporting events on the same night. So how am I going to parent that number 3 versus number 1? I think the third one will have to fend for himself. It's just there will be an element of I think we as a parent, I need to step back and not assume they have the information and knowledge. I was guilty of that with my second one, right? If I'm being honest with it, it's just you get so used to, you're like, oh, I trained this one. That's what I did. I trained it. I didn't teach it anything. I trained it all of the information it needs to know. It knows how to go to a potty. It knows a little bit of math. It knows how to read. On your way. And then you look at your next one, you're like, why don't you know those things that I taught that one? And why don't you already know those things that I've said? Oh, right. I have to teach you again. I have to start over again. I have to slow down. And I'll have to slow down again for the third one. But that's, I think, the big takeaway is just like, I'm going to have to slow down and not assume a level of knowledge that's already there. And I think with number 1, timeouts were in place. Mm-hmm. Number 2, they're a little less common. I think by number 3, they'll be completely phased out of our house.
I feel I can help you, by the way, with 3 schedules in the household. And that's a shared calendar. If you have Apple devices, you put the event into the calendar, and when they clash, you call somebody for a ride. And, I think the parenting part comes in not, mommy or daddy cannot make every single event. And sometimes there'll be a neighbor who may be able to take you to said event. And inversely, you might also find that you'll be taking other people too, because this is where I think it does come in. It takes a village.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, that's my experience. We had 3 hockey schedules running throughout the house, and there were multiple places that everybody had to be. And eventually I introduced them to the bus. When they turned 14, and that sort of,
how dare you?
Yeah, well, that piece went away. I mean, listen, the bus. I mean, parents today had stopped using the bus somewhere in the 90s. That began to go away. I took the bus every day.
Me too.
Yeah.
And I want to jump on that because the drop off for school, it is a nightmare. Now I'm thankful enough that I can walk my kid to school, but the amount of parents that are just lingering around the schoolyard to pick up or drop off their kid is, I don't recall that when I went to school. I don't, like, mom was there, But that's because she was also, she did home daycare. She was picking up 3 or 4 kids and taking them back to the house. But like my friends' parents' moms were never there waiting for them. They just hopped on the school bus or walked home by themselves. I just do not remember parental drop off and pickup being the event and Mad Max Fury Road that it has become, with cars all over the place, zipping in and out of the parking lot, lining up and queuing up to pick up and drop off your kid. It's just nuts. Anyways, pissed me off. It's a sore spot.
Well, I'm with you. I don't know when that actually happened, but I think maybe parents. I think, well, the first problem is the car. I think people have a love affair with their car. They drive around all day. They can do just about anything in it. You can bring your phone, your entire entertainment ecosystem. You can go run errands. You can now overschedule your kids for events and take everything with you. And it's not like the hassle it once was. I mean, I'm an 80s child, and it was drop off for hockey and parents were gone. They didn't need to watch the game.
That stranger is going to take care of you. You're good.
Yeah.
I had smokes with him earlier. He's fine. Go.
Yeah, the pickup and drop off thing is it's certainly interesting, to say the least.
Did you? I'm going to ask you. How did you vet the coaches? Because you said you had a hockey dad. How did you vet the coaches? At what point were you like, I trust this person with my child because it's the most valuable thing you have?
So I was the coach.
Okay, well that eliminates that question. Yep. How did you pick your assistant coaches? How did you pick the people to work with you?
There are other parents with kids on the team, and everybody gets along. I just looked at it as a different place to watch the game.
Okay.
And I knew a little bit about hockey, so I just ran the practices and kept them really, really simple and brought a different. I didn't coach it to a high level. I coached the lower tier kids, which is where my kids were, and we just had fun. And often there was really no other parents who wanted to coach. Because coaching, you had to put a little bit into it in order to do it. So I said, well, I'll coach. And it was just a different place to watch the same game that the parents were watching.
See, but you approached it from the right perspective. A lot of parents aren't. A lot of, like, you saw the other dads who are coaching and think their kid's going pro.
Yeah. And yes, absolutely. I think when I was down at the lower levels, so it was... I think there's a recognition that we just need to. But you're right. When they're 8 and 9 years old, it is bizarro, absolutely bizarro what's out there. And I'll tell you to this day, and this is after being a hockey referee for 20 years, for being a hockey coach, playing hockey, I don't even watch it anymore because I know how the sausage is made, right from novice to the NHL, and I don't need to watch it.
Really?
I just don't watch. I mean, the NHL on a whole, I don't even watch anymore because I don't think it's a very good league. I don't think it's very entertaining. I know how the product is made. It's just a lot of kids who've paid a lot of money to get where they are. There's not a lot of charisma in any of them. I don't think they're a diverse bunch athletically. The way Jaromir Jagr used to play soccer, the way I see a lot of, I'd say kids, but when they get to 21, 22, they're often injured because they've done all the spring hockey. They've done so much stuff. It's just, I've seen so much of how the sausage is made. I've gone in a different direction with my sports, and I watch something completely different that I don't know how it's made. So I happen to enjoy it a little bit more.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. That, respectfully to my 7-year-old, if he ever listens to this, he's not going to be turning pro in any athletic event. My middle one has the potential to be athletic, and I do kind of worry. I'm like, I don't want him getting into any sort of rep sports. If he loves it, obviously I'll let him pursue it, and I'll do my best to be the good sports dad. But I was kind of always average at best at any sport I played, and the pressure that might come with a kid who loves sports, for me as an adult, I'd be like, oh man, I'm gonna have to learn again. I'm going to have to get in shape. I'm going to have to try and keep up with him because he wants to get going. So I part of me is like, but that's a very selfish reason to be worried about it. But I absolutely am.
The only advice I would be able to dispense to you is that keep the sports diverse. So in the springtime, go play ultimate frisbee, play soccer, play t-ball, play baseball. Because hockey, I know we're inside and it's a big schedule and there's a lot that goes with it. Too many games, not enough practices. Put your skates away. Don't do the spring hockey. You might maybe a hockey camp in the summer if you're really itching for it, but go outside.
I have no intention.
Use some other muscles.
Right now, we're going to Sky Zone. I don't know if you have Sky Zone out where you are, but Sky Zone, one of the trampoline parks. We bought a membership every Saturday, every Sunday. We go to bounce from 9 to 11. And it's a good workout for them. It's a good workout for me. Have some fun. Dad brings a snack. You get to be the hero. And gets them out of the hair of my wife for a couple of hours. She can have some alone time. It's all good. So Sky Zone is where it's at right now for us. The novelty hasn't worn off.
Airing out the kids. You need to air them out.
Can't do it in the wintertime. In the summer, I'll end the membership in the springtime when we can start going to the playground again. But Sky Zone has been a blessing this year. I'd never been before up until this year, and man, has it saved me.
All right, well, take care of your knees on those things because
it's my back. It's my
back. Yeah.
It's my back. My back. Because I started getting cocky. I started thinking I could do stuff, and I did stuff, and it was cool. And then I was like, a couple days later, I'm like, oh man, I'm older than I feel. So yeah.
This podcast is brought to you by Robaxaset. Robaxaset will fix any dad's back.
That's a natural sponsorship deal.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Should make that happen.
I take Robaxaset and I felt hungover like the next morning.
Really?
This stuff knocked me out.
I am a 2 Advil and a beer kind of guy. That will loosens me up good enough that I'm like, I'm okay again. I'm fine.
Joe, thanks so much for doing this on the podcast and taking the time to talk parenting. And good luck with the podcast.
Thanks, Matt. That Nerd Dad podcast, available everywhere. Subscribe on YouTube.